My name is Nancy Dillette, and I'm an academic associate at Arizona State University and an oral historian. Today's June 29th, 2009. And we're continuing to interview for the Arizona City County Management Life members for the ACMA Oral History Project. And today I'm going to be interviewing Mike Hutchinson, who began working as an intern for the city of Mesa in 1977 and retired as city manager on December 31st, 2005. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. We are documenting the history of life members in order to share the values and principles of people who created the council manager form of government in Arizona. And today we're interviewing in Mr. Hutchinson's home in Mesa, and it's being recorded by Amanda Suarez. And it's Tuesday afternoon, June 30th.
30th.
Last day of the fiscal year.
Yeah, that's right.
Important day in Arizona. We'll see how the state government is functioning tomorrow. So let's start off and just do a little bit about your personal and educational background, and I'll start with asking you where and when you were born.
I was born in Syracuse, New York, upstate New York in 1953. Lived there through my undergraduate. I went to the State University of New York at Oswego, which is one of the many smaller liberal arts teaching colleges in the state of New York system. When I graduated with a degree in history, and I was looking at public administration programs and discovered that there was one at Arizona State University.
What led you to your interest in a public administration program?
Well, I was a history major. I always had an interest in public affairs and government and current events. And so it seemed like a natural to get an MPA, which is really the degree that gives you an entree into government. Now, I really thought I would probably work in the federal government, but when I came to Arizona and enrolled in the program, got exposed to local government in a fairly significant way through both association with fellow students who had internships, plus at Arizona State they had a great bunch of adjunct professors who taught courses, including Jack Dabalski and Ken Driggs and some other folks who would Brent Brown, who would teach the students, and they were the practitioner courses. So we had a great balance of practitioners plus academics.
What were some of the competition, the competing schools for where you might have gone?
Well, I applied at Syracuse University, which had kind of the premier, still one of the premier academic public administration programs, and a lot of those folks who graduated from there went to work in the federal government. That was kind of the pipeline into the federal government. And then I applied at the State University of New York at Albany, which had a good reputation. Albany was the seat of state government, so all those folks went into state government. But I had this friend living out here who was in the Master of Health Administration program. He was a good buddy of mine from high school and college, and he said, "You ought to come out west because it's an interesting place to be, and the weather was good. And when you live in upstate New York, when it's you have the 3-month summers and the long winters, it was appealing." I had some relatives living here. I had a close aunt and uncle, so I just kind of made the jump to come out here. And the public administration program at Arizona State was fairly small.
Was it new at that time? What's the year you come?
I came in January of 1976, and it was they had probably 8 full-time faculty plus a whole series of adjuncts. I became a TA, a teaching assistant, and so I interacted with the other TAs and the other students. And interesting enough, I've always told people that going to school in Arizona in the metropolitan Phoenix area in those days, you had great access to city government leaders, state government leaders, county folks. So as a student, you could call, you know, the director of the Department of Economic Security and maybe get a call back, and you know, and they were always helpful. So it was just a great environment, and many of those folks who we went to school together and socialized together have remained friends for years, and they're in city management, they're in county management, all successful and really good people and dedicated public servants. So it was really fortuitous, and I wish you know, I could say that I had I tell people this, I had these profound thoughts about coming out here, but it was more than a whim, but it was doing something new.
Yeah.
And never look back. And as I tell people about Arizona, I mean, most people come here, you know, a lot of people think they're going to go back. I thought I was going to go back to Washington, D.C. Well, this place hooks you because it's a nice place to be, and the people are friendly, and the weather's great. And I happen to have great opportunities here, which was probably the other driving issue.
Well, start and tell us a little bit about what some of those good opportunities were.
Well, in the MPA program, you needed to have an internship. You could get credit. So I applied for an internship in the city of Mesa, and actually another MPA student had an internship there. He got the city of Phoenix internship, which was a premier opportunity for him. So he called me and said, "Hey, this job's open here. Why don't you come on?" I didn't know much about Mesa. You know, I'd lived in Tempe, but I knew I needed a job. So I came out and interviewed and was fortunate enough to be hired. So, you know, Mesa in those days when
Who was the city manager then?
City manager was a fellow by the name of J.A. Petrie, Jim Petrie. And Jim was a great guy, longtime city manager. He had a few health challenges. He had a heart attack, and so they had brought another fellow up who was a public works manager by the name of Chuck Luster, C.K. Luster, to help Jim out because Jim was recovering. And so I worked for a fellow by the name of Mike Lee, who was another person. He was an assistant to the city manager as an intern, but had the opportunity to interact with Jim Petrie and Chuck Luster a lot. And the great thing about being in Mesa, the city was growing quickly, had about 100,000 residents, about 1,000 employees, and so there was just lots of opportunities for me to do stuff. And the people who I worked for gave me opportunities. So I had really never had a job in a government entity. I mean, I was learning on the job, but the people were great in the organization. It was just a great organization. I kept up my ties with my ASU friends, and so you would have interactions with them because they were all going into other city organizations. So we had this great network of people who we could talk to about issues. If you were working on a project, you could call up, you know, somebody you knew in Scottsdale or Phoenix or Tempe or Glendale. In those days, there was a group of assistants that formed a professional group, and I was active in that. And again, that was, you know, mostly MPA students who were new in the business, and you know, we had monthly meetings and presentations. Again, another opportunity to network with people and interact. So after about 7 months as an intern, the city offered me a full-time position as an administrative assistant, doing basically the same work but at a little higher level, and I was full-time, which was important. I had a job.
Is this about I'm sorry, what's
Yeah, this would have been February of 1978.
Okay.
And so I continued as a support staff for the city manager and his assistant, and got some opportunities to do a little supervision, did lobbying work, intergovernmental work, research work. In about 1980, then Jim Petrie retired, and he was replaced by Chuck Luster. And the organization in those days, it was like a lot of city organizations. We had a bunch of departments. There was about 21 different departments. It was before the days of consolidation, which Phoenix kind of had led the way in combining departments. So when Chuck Luster became city manager, he decided to form what we would call super departments, lump some of these like functions together, which would reduce the number of direct reports. So he gave me an opportunity to be the community service manager. I was pretty young for that job, but it was just like, again, I was fortuitous. I mean, I was in the right place at the right time, and I always told people, you know, I worked pretty hard, and that helped me. And Chuck Luster had confidence that I could do the job, but it was a pretty big step up. I was supervising people who had been in the organization a long time, who were older than me, and so I learned a little bit of the school of hard knocks, and I was fortunate. These people that I supervised were just terrific about helping me, and you know, in some organizations people would be offended that I was this upstart, but they were great, and some of them are deceased, but the ones that are still alive are still friends of mine.
Can you give an example of what one of the major issues might have been that you had to confront in the community services?
Well, you know, we were building lots of parks and recreation amenities. We ran a community center and a amphitheater that we held musical events. The library was part of that function. We also had, for example, our dial-a-ride function. We didn't have much mass transit, but we had that. So it was just we were going into this huge growth mode, just trying to keep up with amenities for the public. And it was a great experience because in city government, you're always competing for limited resources. And so I learned how to compete for limited resources and to be able to build and operate program leisure services for the public. Probably the first, along in that time, I also was given the job of running our first major bond election in Mesa. And we had followed the Phoenix model, which they still use today. And we appointed a fairly large. So we needed to issue. We needed to issue debt to build capital projects in all most of the major areas of our water, wastewater, electric business that we operate as a city. So I got the assignment of coordinating this bond election. So I got to interact. We had 50 citizens and got to coordinate the research done for the group and also the staffing of the citizens. And so it was a great entree for me into the community. I got to meet a lot of folks who were active in civic affairs and got me a great understanding of our capital needs in the city. We laugh now when people say, because we thought it was a huge amount of money. It was like $57 million, and that was a big deal. And they hadn't issued much debt in Mesa. Through my career, you know, we issued lots of debt. And but this was a great kind of, and we used that model basically throughout the.
How would you raise those funds before you had the
They
bonds?
just,
How did it work before the
well, they didn't have the growth. They would pay largely with cash. In Mesa, for years we ran a water and wastewater, electric and gas business, and so they mostly paid for the improvements, pay as you go, and
Did the idea of a property tax come up for repeatedly?
No, not necessarily in those days. Macy had a property tax in the early, until the early 40s, and then they were making enough money out of profits out of the electric and gas business, and which they had owned as a city since the 20s. So one time, one fiscal year, the city father said, we have enough money. We can set the property tax levy at 0. And they thought that was a pretty good idea, and it was a pretty good idea for 20 or 30 years, but as I explained to people in the 90s and just before I retired, it didn't work, and that model didn't work in a major city that had the major urban challenges that you find in large communities. So we would generally take our utilities would make profits every year, so we could take that. Our sales tax base was growing quickly. We're adding lots of residents, lots of retail. So those years were pretty flush, and we got to do lots of great projects throughout the community, both quality of life projects, but also keeping up with the dramatic growth. Like a lot of the valley cities, I mean, in the early 80s, I mean, there was one, probably 18-month period, maybe 2 years, that we added 30,000 residents. And so that was a huge number for any community. I mean, if you think about it in perspective, it's, like adding the town of Queen Creek in a very short period. So there was lots of challenges. We had very supportive elected officials, really good thinkers and thinking about the long-term issues. In the 80s, we started interacting more with the region. I mean, we became a key regional player, and our mayors were involved. All the regional committees that existed and active. So that was kind of a transformation that happened in the late 70s and 80s, and most of the valley cities became active in MAG, and MAG had been around for a number of years, but really became more prominent in those years.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience when you would shift from one mayor to another, how that had an impact on the city manager's office?
Well, we were always pretty fortunate. In Mesa, those who ran for elected office generally had served in some type of either on a high-level board appointment or had been on the city council and understood the role of the city council and a council manager form of government, were supportive of city staff, and felt that they had hired the professional staff to take care of their policy decisions and to implement them in an effective and efficient way. So we were lucky to have just great leaders. Now, every time you'd have new styles, and some, would take a little bit of an adjustment, but we always just kind of, it was never we against them. It was just, hey, we're in this together, we're growing quickly, we got lots of challenges, let's work together, let's make sure we provide you with the information you need, be it a mayor or new council members, to make decisions. So I always tell people that I was really fortunate that I worked for probably 40 elected officials, and by and large they were all very supportive of what we did, very supportive of me personally, and supportive of the city employees, and the challenges that we all kind of worked our way through together.
How many, so at what point did you become an assistant city manager? And
well, after my community service stint, which didn't really last that long, Chuck Luster, the city manager, wanted to have an assistant so that he had somebody who, if he wanted to leave town, he could leave in charge. So I was appointed the assistant city manager in January 1981, and we only had one. And I served in that role with Chuck Luster for almost 20 years. And he is a great friend and was a great mentor to me in terms of his management style and how he approached the business of city management. He came out of the civil engineering. He was the public works manager and a civil engineer by training. And so it was kind of, in the business, that was kind of the old school. But he was just this, he's still a good friend of mine. Just this great leader, organizational leader, quiet leadership, not flamboyant, smart, understood the city issues, very participative in terms of getting employees involved, giving us opportunities to learn new things and make mistakes. One of the challenges is in any organization, public or private, if you're working hard and doing stuff, you're going to stub your toe once in a while. And we didn't like to make mistakes, but when you made one, you didn't feel like it was going to be the end of your career.
Mm-hmm. Can you give an example of one where it might have felt like a much bigger deal, but?
Trying to think through. It would be kind of those day-to-day things that, we might give the city council, maybe we'd work hard on a policy issue and they'd go the other way, or maybe our reports weren't as thorough as they needed to be. Again, the philosophy was, we're going to learn, we're going to, sometimes the policymakers are going to go their own way. They're going to give them all the best information, our best advice, they're going to go their own way, but we're going to learn from that and certainly implement their decisions as best we can. And I'll think of one of
Okay. I'm curious about a little bit more about Lester's management style, and that because other people at that time were shifting from coming from the engineering background to the administration background.
He's, as I say, he's a great friend and great mentor for me. Jim Collins wrote this book recently, and Jim Collins is now kind of the hot man about these quiet leaders versus the flamboyant leaders. And when I read that book, I thought about two people. One, Chuck Lester, who I work with for 25 plus years, but Marvin Andrews, who was the city of Phoenix city manager, who I knew, and the same kind of style, just hardworking, very smart, well-read, didn't want to be in the spotlight, kind of behind the scenes, tried to provide the information to the council so they could make the proper decision, understood their role, that the council, we'd give them all the information and they had to make the best decision they could. So he transitioned from this civil engineering public works manager role, and Mesa always had a huge public works function because we served major utilities and had a big transportation program. But he was just, for our employees, to use the word beloved is not an understatement. I mean, we didn't have labor unions in Mesa, so he always viewed himself as the representative of the employees. And every year we have to, in the budget process, have to go to the council and say, we want to improve benefits, we want to have a cost of living adjustment or merit pay, and he was the great spokesman. And I learned how to be a manager from him. I mean, and being able to interact with folks from other cities in the area. There was this great group of, I'm going to call them more senior manager. Ken McDonald was in Tempe. There's a guy named Frank Elshire in Scottsdale, and then Roy Pedersen and Chuck Luster. There's a guy named Stan Vandepute in Glendale. He got followed by guys like Marty Banneker, and then the whole series of Phoenix folks. Well, you would be able to interact with those folks at regional committees. You would go to the Arizona City Management meeting, and they would be there. And I always said one of the great things about this area was people's willingness to share ideas and give you information, which I think continues today, and that's why it's such a great place to work if you're in urban government, because these cities are doing cutting edge things, have been for 40 years, and continue to do them today, and share that expertise among the region through organizations like MAG or just professional associations. So
Were there other places in the country that you looked at that had any kind of a comparable situation that you ever thought you'd like to work there to gain something that you couldn't here, or was there something?
Well, you know, we would try to gauge. I mean, if you had to look at other regions, and I think all the cities. I mean, you'd look at, you know, the Los Angeles area because they had growth and development. You know, 20, 30 years before this region. We looked at the Denver area because, again, a metropolitan area with a lot of suburban cities, and so we would go up and visit. There was a city in Denver that was growing about the same pace as we were, Aurora, and so it was uncanny. We'd go up there and they'd be working on similar issues and similar development challenges, or trying to police operations issues. So, yeah, we would always, you know, San Diego had a good reputation, and some of the, you know, the Dallas region. Mostly western cities. I mean, obviously there's good government all over the country. Charlotte, for example, always had a great reputation. But we would, I mean, in terms of research, we would focus on some of the western cities and try to understand what they were doing. Go visit them if we wanted to learn about things.
From some of the other interviews, it sounds like the Phoenix area really enjoyed a great reputation. There was something kind of unique going on here that gave people opportunities that maybe they couldn't find elsewhere.
Yeah, I think once, if you were in a major city here, even in the smaller communities that were growing fast, I mean, you had the opportunity to do lots of different stuff. So that your days were always interesting. You know, you got to interact because of the closeness of the cities. You were interacting with other officials, and you got to solve regional challenges. You know, I got to work on water-related challenges, transportation, air quality. We did sports facilities. I mean, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to work on just really interesting issues. And Chuck Luster gave me lots of opportunities. He'd let me run on my own. You know, I kept him informed. You know, which you have to do in an organization. But you know, I just had the chance to learn new things. So I think if you talk to people, and you already that are kind of came through the system the same time I did that, I mean, that's what they tell you was the challenges were because of the growth. I mean, were just interesting, and you got to be in the mix and be able to help shape the community, your community, and build a better region through the MAG process. And you know, a lot of us served on MAG, and Jack Dabalski, of course, and Ken Driggs ran, and they were friends. And you know, we, for example, in the mid-'80s, when we decided we needed more freeways in this region, and you know, there are a lot of people who worked on that, but the guy who put that together was Jack Dabalski. Trotted around all the cities with his map, his Warren map, and built a consensus to try to get a half-cent sales tax improved. And you know, we were in the fray, and we were arguing for our positions. But you know, we always, even though we'd have some disagreements among the cities, I mean, we always would come together after the fray and try to solve another problem. So it was just fun to be here.
Can you talk a little bit about the kind of image of Mesa at that time and what sort of contributed to it? Because it was obviously going through so much change, and yet each of the valley towns have had and continue to have, they project a sense of who they are.
Yeah, Mesa, you know, Mesa was known as a small Mormon town, and you know, when I came to work, there was about 100,000 residents. and the Mormon influence in Mesa has been dramatic and positive. When it was, a city of 7,000, it was pretty much dominated by Mormon leadership. As it grew, there became a lot of other denominations, and we always used to kid about when they would ask about the population in Mesa. People would say, "Oh, it's 50% Mormon." Well, it wasn't. There was 30% Catholic and a lot of Presbyterians and Baptists, but it was always a church-going town. I mean, there's lots of churches. The LDS influence, because a lot of their members were active in the community, on the local school board, on the city council, the Chamber of Commerce. They were at the state legislature. They were influential. So that was the image, kind of this sleepy Mormon town. Well, that changed pretty dramatically in the 70s when Mesa doubled in size, and then it doubled again in the 80s. And I think other parts of the region still kind of viewed it as this Mormon town over there. But we had lots of good things going on. I think we had a good reputation among city governments as innovative, largely because our council allowed us to do that. They allowed us to take risks. We ran this gas business, we ran an electric business, we ran solid. And when we were doing stuff, we had our community recreation programs were as good as any in the valley. So I think among the professionals, we had a very good reputation as a well-managed city and one that participated actively in regional affairs. We were the second largest city in the region behind Phoenix, and so we were counted on to weigh in on issues, to support regional issues, and did that. I mean, today, I remember one of our mayors said his goal was to try to convince the leadership in Phoenix that it wasn't this sleepy Mormon town. And so he got very active in regional groups and tried to interact with Phoenix folks to say, this Mesa has changed, and it changed dramatically.
Was it a huge thing when the 60 came through, and then later with the 202?
Yeah, in terms of the growth in Mesa, that really spurred growth on it, and there was some pretty thoughtful planning about that. I was involved when I came to Mesa. I believe the 60 went to maybe Dobson Road, so I was.
What was the original thinking for the actual alignment that it took?
Well, I think initially some people had hoped it would be a little closer to Central Mesa, but as they negotiated with the state, it became located farther south. And once they got the alignment, it was pretty straight. And I kid about the many speeches that I wrote for elected officials as they went down to the Arizona Department of Transportation and lobbied for extensions of that freeway. And the other East Valley cities lobbied too, because they had a dramatic impact on Chandler and Gilbert and Apache Junction and the other areas. So they were with us too. And we were fighting for a piece of the pie, and we knew that with a freeway you would get development, you would get malls. The Fiesta Mall was developed in the early 80s. That was our first regional mall. Superstition Springs, again, wouldn't have developed hadn't it been for the 60 being there. Then it was called the Superstition Freeway. But I thought the city, one of our challenges was to be ready for that growth. When that freeway was built, you had to have your arterial street system ready to take the new traffic. You knew there was going to be lots of growth, so you had to have your water and wastewater services. You had to build parks and libraries. And I was always proud of our organization that we were, when freeways opened, we were ready. Once in a while you'd get a little behind, but we had a great.
You're constantly anticipating the growth and the needs and the facilities.
And the 202 is another story. when the next freeway plan, you know, when we started talking about it in '85, and that was supposed to be a parkway, but when we looked at the needs, it was clear to us that it needed to be a freeway. And so we were aggressive in the regional process of identifying our needs and promoting those. Again, MAG kind of coordinated all the efforts, and all of the cities we used to fight about priorities and money, and but again, it was we knew that we had to have better access in and out of our community to interact with the region.
Was there a lot of competition for Hughes among the cities?
No, that's a interesting kind of Mesa story. We hired a airport manager who ran the then Orange County Airport, now John Wayne. He was running Falcon Field. We hired him to be our manager. He wanted to leave the Los Angeles area. Had grown. He was kind of tired of the congestion. So we were fortunate enough to convince him to come over and run our fairly small general aviation airport. Well, Hughes had a consultant who was looking for space, and so he knew our airport guy was a guy named Bob Breshnan. He knew Bob, and he called him one day and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a spot for this potential helicopter factory, and you know some spots?" And so Bob gave him some spots and says, "Well, why don't you think about us?" Because we had, as a city, bought land around the airport to protect it from urban encroachment. Pretty forward thinking, you know, and so we had some property that we, once the helicopter folks identified this as a potential, and our consultant said, "Let's look at that." Well, we had land that we could give them at a discounted price. We had a reputation of being able to deliver the major infrastructure, which is roads, water, and wastewater largely. So
What kind of sites were they considering before?
well, I think I don't know, they were looking at other sites in this region, but they were looking at Las Vegas, because that Hughes was part of the Howard Hughes Empire. ACMA had land up there. They were looking at probably other parts in the greater Los Angeles area. The real issue that was kind of a subtle issue was we got real aggressive on the helicopter works and that part of the project, and but with the notion that they would move the rest of their McDonnell, then Hughes facility to Mesa, which was, they were doing they're building other type of helicopters. So we were, of course, elated with the Apache plant and worked hard to make sure that we were ready for that, and they could use the airport. But the real hook for us was this potential of getting 7,000 jobs when they moved everybody from Culver City, California. So that came to fruition, and that was a huge day in Mesa and the region. I mean, 7,000 jobs was, in this area was huge. So, but that was hard work by city staff and our elected officials with the Hughes, then McDonnell Douglas. They got bought by McDonnell Douglas. With those folks, convincing them that this was a good place to be for their business purposes, but also for their employees, and who were coming over from Los Angeles, and they came here and they could usually buy a very nice house, and because the market was hot in Los Angeles, but they want to make sure they had good schools. And in Mesa, not only do we have, I think, a well managed city government, but an outstanding school system. And so we would sell that together. And most good employers, they want their employees to be happy with their environs and their opportunities. So that was.
So in this case, it wasn't so much competition with some of your neighboring cities as it was.
We had lots of those. We had lots of other competitions.
Right.
But it was really just this opportunity, and we happened to have an airport manager who knew a consultant, And once we got rolling on the thing, we had a pretty good system, like most cities do. Put a team together, figure out what they needed, meet with their folks, and make sure we could meet their deadlines. And of course, our council was thrilled because it was a huge new employer for us. We had Motorola and Empire Machinery, which were great employers, but this was kind of the next level. And, you know, so it was an exciting time.
So that was kind of a high point, and then came the Western Savings and Loan fallout, or?
Yeah, that was in the late '80s, the mid. You know, they had the savings and loan challenges, and that really impacted. That really impacted our the economy in the region. That whole savings and loan deal. We had an interesting relationship with Western Savings because they owned the land around the Superstition Springs Mall, and so we had lots of interaction with the principals of Western Savings, founded by Gary, was managed by the Driggs family, and had outstanding relationships with them, and really put the deal together to get Superstition Springs Mall in Mesa. The Gilbert folks were desperate. They were smaller. They were desperate to get retail in their community, and they actually came and annexed a piece of property that we thought they shouldn't have, because we had a agreement that Mesa would be north of Baseline Road and Gilbert would be south. One day we woke up and they had annexed north. We used to call them midnight annexations. Well, they had a developer who said he'd build a mall on this little notch piece of property at Higley Road. And so that kind of charged us up to go talk to the Western Savings folks and kind of move forward with Superstition Springs Mall. So, you know, Gary Driggs owned a lot of the property. He put some infrastructure in. He put some additional lanes on the overpass which they needed to serve the mall. Westcorp then bought it and developed the mall, and we had again another outstanding relationship with them. And it was a method again that most cities used here, where you would try to identify what their needs were and work with them aggressively to make sure you were meeting their deadlines. But getting that mall in Mesa was a huge deal because we were so dependent on sales tax in those days. Again, it kept our sales tax growth moving forward.
And that was about the first time when you had the first woman mayor in Mesa?
Yeah, those were great times. You know, as city manager, I always got to have great personal interaction with the mayors. I would go to a lot of the regional meetings with them. So they became great friends, and Peggy Rubap happened to grow up in upstate New York. And so she was from Buffalo, and I was from Syracuse. So we had just had a great relationship. She had served on the Planning and Zoning Board. She had been a council member. Again, in Mesa, we were fortunate to have people who had experience. So when they came onto the council and had to make hard decisions, they were used to making them. And it's hard to explain to people that when because people watch it on television now and they think it's easy to make push that button, yes or no. It's really hard. And it's helpful if someone's had experience on a planning and zoning board where they had to face down a crowd of angry citizens who were they were maybe not going to vote the way they wanted to. And so I thought it was a good system in Mesa where people would go through as we call them, the chairs, and they would have experience. So when they had to make hard calls, they'd have the perspective, plus they'd have the ability to vote. Now, occasionally we'd have elected officials, every city does, it's a real challenge for them to make that, go against the crowd. And but we were generally in Mesa, our folks would try to we'd give everyone the opportunity to speak. I always thought our meetings and our mayors and our elected officials really worked hard to make sure citizens felt like they had input and that they were listened to. And sometimes you wouldn't agree, but I think generally most citizens say, "Oh, I got to tell my story." And we, were there initiatives to really open up
the process to invite and open up people?
Yeah, there was
More
a,
transparent?
yeah, there was some, there was some concern about, you know, the way that we posted our agendas and, you know, Mesa wasn't the only one that got challenged on that. And there was a couple of citizens who also became my friends, who were kind of the watchdogs. And so we had a period where people were trying to make sure we posted things in certain times, and that, you know, those were all good things. I thought that made people feel like they had more access. It made governing a little more difficult, cumbersome, but by and large, I think it worked pretty well. We had some initiatives, you know, there was a desire in Mesa, mostly because we looked at what other communities were doing in terms of design review. And Scottsdale had a very aggressive design review, Tempe had one, and we didn't have a very aggressive one. So there was a group of citizens who got together and said, you know, we got to change the way Mesa looks for the long term. And so again, there was some, you know, some initiative activity in terms of design review process. And that was hard. Mesa's a conservative place, always has been and probably always will. And so property rights are important. But I always thought that our leaders, and a lot of them were, you know, very conservative folks, could look kind of down the future and say, yeah, this is, we ought to be thinking about that. How our community looks is going to be important for the long term.
Well, let's jump ahead then. You're talking about Mesa always being conservative, and
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about a surprising move to create the Performing Arts Center at the time that came about?
Yeah, I was intimately involved as the assistant city manager, and we had a effort in the early '80s to try to, we had a tax ballot to raise a tax to build an art center in our community center, and we got trounced. But there, you know, there's always a small group who said we ought to not forget about this. And so there were a couple of kind of efforts to move it forward, study groups. And Mesa always, like most cities in this region, always had citizen groups looking at issues. Council appointed lots of ad hoc groups. We had a whole series of advisory. And so there was, if citizens were interested in issues, there was mechanisms for them to try to have an impact on the community and on the elected officials' feelings. So the issue kept bubbling, and in the mid-90s, we needed, our revenues had started to stabilize in terms of not, when we were growing very quickly, our sales tax grew, we were the dominant retail provider in the East Valley. That started changing as other cities got their sales tax and their retail development. So we needed some quality of life improvements, some parks and library services. We needed to hire some more police and fire officials. So we put together a package. There was, Mayor Brown was the mayor, and went out to the public with a increase in our sales tax, and we called it the quality of life tax. And there was a committee in the community that promoted it, and we won, and that then triggered a whole series of quality of life improvements, parks, libraries, pools. We were able to hire firefighters and police officers that we were having a hard time keeping up with because of the growth. The sales tax had started to not grow as quickly as it had in the past. And then the premier project was this Performing Arts Center, which had we wanted it to both be an amenity for the community, because we had a great reputation of having fine arts in the community at a small scale, but both recreation programs and performing venues, but not the ones that we thought we needed. So we were able to put together a major project in our downtown area, which helped we were always trying to promote downtown as a destination point, and we had a huge investment as a city with our city offices and our infrastructure down there in our downtown. So we put together a project and we're able to build a $100 million performing arts center, and actually paid with no debt because we had this revenue stream, and half the sales tax paid for the capital, and then half it was going to pay for the operating costs. So we had a way to pay for the operating costs, which most cities can't figure out how to do that, because you can usually, sometimes you get capital money, but it's that longer term cost. So the way we structured that, and our voters were willing to support, gave us the ability to pay cash for lots of projects, plus have that ongoing revenue stream. So it was, and a lot of people.
It's pretty audacious.
Yeah, it was interesting. We had it. Mayor Brown was a great leader on it. We had a great group of citizens who worked very hard. Strategically, we had something for about everybody in it. We had folks who wanted city government to pay for police and fire, maybe not much. We had that covered. And so it was a pretty interesting package that we put together, the staff and the council together.
I mean, for the whole bond,
Yeah, well, this was a sales tax.
for the whole sales tax.
Yeah, we call it the quality of life.
Yeah.
So they're still using it. I mean,
But
there's.
how did the actual Performing Arts Center become so prominent and such a big
We had a master
part of it?
we had a master plan for our community center, and that was developed in the mid '70s, and it was actually by the Frank Lloyd Wright people, the Taliesin people. And so that master plan, we built an amphitheater and a community center, and then we added there was a senior center there that transformed into another use, but always on that site was this Performing Arts Center. And in this community, there's always, the performing arts in the schools were important. There was community theater, that they used gyms. There's always this group of folks who said, we ought to have a facility like they have in Phoenix, or like Scottsdale had. Scottsdale built that Performing Arts Center in the mid '70s, and it was a great amenity. So not only as an amenity for your own citizens, but an attraction to bring people from the region into your community and to help downtown. And Mesa's, like many suburban cities, has struggled with our downtown. I always would tell newly elected officials that the most controversial and expensive projects you'd work on will be your downtown projects. And a lot of them, they look at me askance. And I'd say, we'll talk in a couple of years. And I don't care what community you're in, that they're always controversial and always expensive, because generally you have to subsidize them. And communities that can be controversial. And people view that the downtown is, that one of the buzzwords in downtown was it's the people's living room. And they want, if you live in a community, and you're active, you want to be proud of your downtown, and you want it to be something you can take your friends to. So there's always lots of visibility. And, over the years, we've had our ups and downs. We had great moments where we did things in our downtown, and we had moments where we were challenged, and it's still a work in progress. Our current mayor, Mayor Smith, has taken it on as one of his priorities. My advice to elected officials was, you can't fix downtown in 5 or 10 years. We used to kid about Tempe being the 20-year overnight success story.
Right.
It took years and lots of hard decisions by elected officials, led by people like Harry Mitchell, and who was there for a long time, had great perspective, and would be able to marshal the political will to do hard things. And
We'll talk a little bit about that process here, because in the beginning you were talking so much about growth and almost exponential, trying to keep up with. Can you talk about how the city was filling out on the edges and expanding and annexing, and then what happened as a consequence downtown? And then
it was a real challenge. Again, with the freeway corridors and with our proximity in the region, we were an attractive place for the development community to build new houses. And, you know, we were an attractive place to live. We had, you know, great schools and shopping and parks and programs. So people wanted to live in Mesa. So there was a pretty dramatic pressure to continue to grow in the new areas of the community. And although we worked on downtown for, you know, most of my career, where there was always some emphasis on downtown, we established a redevelopment committee and a commission, and we had a downtown management group, one of the first ones in the areas in the region to do that. You know, it became a real push-pull of where you put your resources and your priorities. But, you know, the philosophy was that, you know, people had land that they should be able to develop it. And I think as we look back in the 90s, some of us thought, some elected officials and staff, that we probably should have taken more care in the 80s to make sure that our neighborhoods were more sustainable. And we would talk among ourselves about that, and that led to new initiatives to try to make sure that your neighborhoods had parks and amenities, and that the housing stock was better constructed. And we had some residential design standards that we brought in that we would say to each other, wish we had done this in the 80s. The growth, as I said, it was so dramatic, and you know, most cities in this region had a real boom in apartments because there were some tax laws that advantaged people building apartments. So we all ended up with lots of apartments, and those, in some cases, led to challenges because they were not constructed as well as maybe we would have liked them to be. And so in the mid-90s, we started looking at our aging neighborhoods. And as our planning director used to say, we built so many houses so quickly that they were all aging at the same time. There wasn't this kind of staggered aging period. And so neighborhoods could turn pretty quickly in terms of, you know, areas where more rentals than home ownership and those type of things. So the city council was interested in trying to do things to try to stabilize our neighborhood. So we started a neighborhood service department, went out and met in schools throughout the community, and that was a project that I really got interested in as an assistant. And Chuck Luster was still the city manager, and he allowed me to kind of do my thing on that. So we started I thought some pretty innovative programs to try to both stabilize our older neighborhoods and think more clearly about the new neighborhoods and how we design them so that they would be more sustainable in the future. But we'd already built a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so there was we had to go back and reinvest in neighborhoods. And I think that'll be a continuing challenge in all the cities in Phoenix because of those spurts of growth that we had. Mm-hmm. And I think that'll be a continuing challenge in all the cities in Phoenix because of those spurts of growth that we had.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about in the mid-90s, or sometime in the 90s, you're recognizing some of the consequences of growth. Were you also then recognizing the consequences of the kinds of jobs that are being created?
Yeah, we like most cities, you know, had what we thought was a pretty aggressive economic development approach. We actually followed an Aurora, Colorado model of forming a nonprofit to do economic development made up of citizens and the chamber and the city folks, and did lots of promotional activities trying to attract both industrial customers plus retail, because we were so dependent on retail not having a property tax that we needed to continue to attract retail into our community. And there was some criticism of that because people would say those are not the best jobs. But I always used to suggest to people we had to go after both. We couldn't just say we're not going to try to get retail. That's why we got aggressive about Superstition Springs Mall, which has generated, you know, millions of dollars of income for the city. So when we were dependent on that source, and so we did that, but we also, you know, the McDonnell Douglas Boeing story was a huge story. A big TRW airbag operation. They built actually 2 facilities. One in far southeast Mesa where we had as a city, go down and build water and gas lines to them in a fairly short timetable. So, you know, and there was lots of smaller businesses that we tried to attract around our Falcon Field Airport first, and then when Williams Gateway Airport, when the Air Force decided that was surplus and closed the base, that triggered a whole another series of activities to try to enhance economic development around that area. Mm-hmm. So we would, and you know, we were in the sports facilities game with we had the linchpin of the Cactus League with the Chicago Cubs, so we worked hard to build them new facilities over time, a couple times, and to try to attract them and in cooperation with some regional financing entities. So we tried to have a mixture of economic development, both industrial jobs, tourism-related jobs, and the retail component.
And what was the impetus then to go to the district system?
Citizens.
How did that come about?
Citizens felt like the city had gotten too large, and that with all the council, and we were probably at 120 square miles. So it was a large city, and for someone to run, 2 reasons. People thought that some of the council, just because of the size, wouldn't be in touch with their neighborhood. And in any city, sometimes if you do a map of where the council members live, sometimes they're in the same area, sometimes they're not. So a group of citizens decided to put an item on the ballot to go to districts, and really the reason was close representation closer to home and less costly for people to run. They didn't have to run citywide campaigns. They could run in a district and it wouldn't cost them as much. So
was there a lot of opposition to
well,
it?
yeah, it was the community was split. You know, there's pros and cons to the district system. I mean, the great challenge for city management is to, when you have district council members, to make sure that they continue to think about the city at large and the big kind of global issues that you got to deal with, be it air quality or providing water and wastewater treatment or regional recreation facilities. I always thought that was the challenge, and we were fortunate enough that our council, when the district system was implemented, and we had to go through the system of implementing it, and we leaned a lot on our friends in Phoenix who had done that in the early 80s, and we actually had Marvin Andrews and a fellow by the name of Jack Tubman come out and talk to our staff as we were trying to implement it and talk about what they learned and how they did it, and again, generous with their time and expertise. And
so what was the transition like?
It was.
Finally made it.
It went pretty smoothly. You know, we had to change our staffing patterns a little bit, and you know, we changed how we published some of the material. We would identify what district, for example, if there was a project, we would identify it more in that district. But I thought it went pretty smoothly, and we were again fortunate to have, by and large, elected folks who knew they represented a district, but understood that there was a lot of citywide issues that they needed to be thoughtful about. Mm-hmm. And so it's been in effect, plus 10 plus years, and they'll redistrict after the next census, so they'll draw the districts again. They're quite large. There's
how many?
Well, it's 450,000 in Mesa now, so you've got 6 districts, so they're quite large. They're almost not as large, of course, as Phoenix, but 70,000 plus, people. So there's lots of responsibility, and we were able to, just certain council members want to communicate with their districts in certain ways, so we hired staff to support them and made those transitions. I thought some of us were a little nervous about it. I think generally we like the at-large system. I mean, a lot of us grew up in that system, thought that was a better way of governance because you wouldn't get focused on one area. And there's some bad examples of district systems that don't work very well. But the Mesa system, I think, is working well. And we used examples from other cities, not only in this area, but talk to folks and how to staff people, make sure that should keep the wheels of government going well.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the field itself, the changes that you've seen in the field of city management. Have you continued to be involved with ASU in some way, or mentoring the next generation of city managers? Or?
I, like a lot of my fellow city managers, we're very interested in the profession and keeping young people interested in coming into our profession. And throughout my tenure, and it was supported by our council and our senior management staff in Mesa, we always tried to have interns that we would give opportunities. I was an intern, and we hired lots of young people, and we usually paid them. They were paid internships, and tried to give them good assignments where they were meaningful. So, as in many cities in this region, your interns were kind of your new folks. That was your entry-level position, and people became, if they were doing good things, they usually got permanent jobs, and we got to look at them, and they got to look at us. So, when people started looking at the baby boomers retiring, there was an emphasis on the national level from our national association to try to continue to talk to young people about the profession. So I would take any opportunity I could to try to talk to students about careers in city government, because I was a city government person, but generally just public service, and be it the federal government or county or a nonprofit. I had this outstanding opportunity and career that I was able to make a difference in this community. And I tell young people that, it's not all about making money, although I was paid well, and government officials in this region get paid well. But the great thing about the job was just making a difference, be it building a park or helping plan freeways or help with air pollution challenges. So I try to talk about that still today. I'm what they call a range rider. I'm an Arizona range rider, so I still have good ties with the profession, because Lloyd Harrelson and myself go out and when people have challenges in their jobs or they're transitioning, they got fired, we try to get them back on track. So that's a positive. But we also several of us got involved with a program at the School of Public Affairs that we named after Marvin Andrews, and we hope that it'll be the premier city management training program in the country in the not too distant future. Kansas has had kind of the premier program, but we think this program, because of the way we structured it, will soon be the best program in the country.
Tell us about that structure a little bit.
Well, there was a program in the University of Pennsylvania that used to be called the Fellows Institute, that some people, for example, Lloyd Harrell went through, where as a student you would work half-time in a city government or a county government, and then you would take your classes largely in the afternoon or in the evening. So that program went away, and there was really no program that was specifically focused to give students a day-to-day operational opportunity for pay along with an academic experience. And we've added some additional features. We have a mentoring program as a piece of that program, along with opportunities to travel to conferences. So a group of us raised some money so that, along with the internship and some tuition waivers, the students would get a stipend for some of their living expenses. So a bunch of retired city management types formed a committee. I was chairman of it. We raised about $300,000 for this Marvin Andrews program, and it's in an endowment. That money will be used to give stipends to students. So we're in our fourth class. The fourth class will be starting in August, and we had an opportunity to, a group of us met with about 6 of the Andrews folks that are in various stages. Some are out working. And it was really a pretty emotional deal, because these young people came up and talked about how this program impacted their life. I mean, some of them didn't know what they wanted to do, but they thought they'd be interested in government. They got this opportunity. They love the field. They think they're making a difference. So it's been a rewarding experience for all of us this group who were able to kind of raise some of the money they needed, plus they asked us for advice on the program and what the curriculum. So
unlike when you came in and it was really the weather that might have attracted you, there's actual program there.
Yeah, and it's the School of Public Affairs.
Yeah.
Bob Denhart, the Arizona City Management Association, probably about 10 years ago, wanted to enhance our relationship with the university communities, both University of Arizona, Arizona State, and Northern Arizona. And so we made the association had a focus on that. Bob Denhart was running the School for Public Affairs. He had the same. He wanted to be involved. He wanted to improve that program, get well-known faculty, which they've done. So now not only do we have this great program for students, but we also have the Innovation Center, which is a national group located at Arizona State University. So we have become, in my opinion, the hub of academic and practical innovations and training in the country. And we're not at where we want to be, but because we have this great incubator here with all these great well-run cities. We have a great public university with now some programs that focus on urban management. We have an innovations group that their job is to promote innovations in city government, state government, and so the stars have all aligned, and our reputation is growing. And again, the people who have been involved, and there's been a bunch of us, we want to try to make sure young people know about the profession and continue to think it'd be a good place to work and they can make a difference.
Talk with us a little bit about what are some of the qualities that you would look for in a student that you think are really essential in the city management profession?
Well, a general interest in public affairs and public issues, the ability to write, the ability to think on their feet, the interest in being involved. One of the things that I learned pretty quickly is that, particularly in a region, there's lots of stuff going on, and you've got to keep abreast of the changes, both in the political environment, but also in the management environment and the technological changes that we've all experienced. So I would look for people who think that they want to make a difference and have thought about that, and view government as a way they can do that, and that they can have an impact on their community and have a rewarding career. And they better have a sense of humor. Because, like every career, public, private, nonprofit, there's bumps along the way. and you have good weeks and bad weeks. As my boss Chuck Lester used to say, somebody asked him if he enjoyed coming to work, he'd always say, I enjoyed coming to work most every day. But I mean, that's our lives. I mean, you should talk to anybody in any career. So to make a go in this business, you've got to have, I think you got to be an optimist, particularly now because of the economic turn down and you know, the cities are having to make terrible cutbacks on services. And most of us grew up where we were challenged to keep up with services, and we wanted to provide new and different services, be it a great swimming program or a new library, summer reading program. And we like doing that. And so it's really hard now when some of the folks who are still have built programs, now they're paring them back. That's tough to do because you see the difference that can make on kids' life, for example, in a summer reading program. I use my 2 daughters as an example of going through a Mesa summer reading program. And they have this great love for learning and reading that they've now kept. And I give the Mesa Public Library a lot of credit. So it's a different time for management, and I currently have a part-time job where I'm interacting with city managers, and so we talk a lot about the changes they're going to make. It's very difficult because you're not only cutting programs, but if you're laying people off, you're impacting people's families. So it's tough. So you got to be an optimist. You got to have outlets to make sure you can handle the stress that comes with public jobs and private jobs.
What about the transition that you made when you went from being the assistant to being the city manager? How did you make that transition?
Oh, it was hard. It was a real, you think you're ready and people tell you, but it is a real transition. And I'm unabashed about it. It was, you're making the calls. And I had this great relationship with Chuck Lester where we were this great team, and we would talk about issues and what we ought to do, and let's do this, and we'll figure it out, and we'll go this way. And well, all of a sudden, I had to find that,
to be Chuck.
and I had to find somebody else to talk. So I hired some good staff right away that could support me in that, because I always wanted to have a team approach to management. I think you get better programs when you have lots of folks thinking about how to run them, and you get different opinions. I try to surround myself with good people, and but there's stuff about lonely at the top. There's some of that. Now, it got better, but it's and I have that experience now talking to, as a range rider, I will try to talk to new city managers, and I can look in their eyes and tell them when they're not sleeping good, and I ask them, because that happens. These are stressful jobs and these are stressful times. So all of us have coping mechanisms, and fortunately I had a great staff. I had supportive elected officials, great citizens in the community that I knew because I'd been here so long, that were supportive of me. Family environment that was great, supportive, and other mentors that I could call on. And that's, I would occasionally talk to other folks in the area about issues. And I had dealt with most of the stuff as an assistant. But I always thought that I could learn something if I had a challenge, if I could call Frank Fairbanks or Marty Banneker or Lloyd Harrell and say, hey, we've got this issue. What'd you do? How'd you handle it? It was always helpful to have that information as you made decisions. So we would always try to reciprocate, and I try to do that with new managers if they want to talk about challenges. That's part of our role as range riders. But it took me a while to catch my stride. But like most jobs, you you learn, and you know, we set goals, and the council was, as I said, supportive, and we got to work on fun stuff that,
So once you made that transition, did you find being an assistant takes certain kinds of skills?
yeah.
And what did you find that you really needed to learn on the job that you just couldn't have had being the assistant? What was necessary at that city manager level?
Making those final recommendations. I mean, you had to, you know, if there was an issue that was thorny, you had to come up and make the recommendation to the council. And, you know, occasionally everyone wouldn't agree. So you'd work on lining up the votes, you know, and I tried to have lots of interaction with our elected officials and talking to them all the time about, you know, these issues are today's issues, but we got these coming down the path, be thinking about that. So, you know, you have to, anymore, you have to be more proactive because things come at you so fast.
Were there certain things that you learned that came in handy that helped you to develop your own management style? And
Well, yeah, again, you know, I always feel that I was lucky to have great mentors, Chuck Luster and other folks in the region. But, you know, what I think that, and one of the big changes that's happened over the last 34 years is the need to keep your elected officials up to speed. And it's hard because information flows so quickly. So we put mechanisms in place where we were, again, I was meeting with them, but we were also communicating with them quickly. If there was an issue, a crisis in the community or some police incident, so that people felt like they knew the information, they wouldn't get caught short.
what
So
about around the time of 9/11, when Valdir Sodi was shot here in Mesa?
that was a really unusual time. I can remember that day, we had an Economic Development Advisory Board meeting that I was at, and we sat and watched the towers go down, and the council was calling, they wanted to know what was going on, and we had a Boeing plant, there was some issues about security, you know, were they gonna be attacked? We had a great team, and we had thought through some of the, you know, we had great leaders in our public safety area in particular, but also throughout the organization. And so we were able to gather quickly and figure out a plan and interact with the region where that was appropriate. That shooting happened on a Saturday afternoon, and I can tell you where I was. I was sitting in that living room, and that call came in where that individual was killed. And it was, I remember I went on the site, and our chief of police was there, Jan Strauss, great leader, and the media was gathering, and it was surreal, and of course a very tragic time for the community and for that family and for the Sikh community in the region. And we went and met with his family. He lived about 4 blocks down, so the chief and I went in and talked to him. And it was a pretty emotional day. And our police guys caught the guy pretty quickly. So, I mean, we, as an organization, we did what we were supposed to do in terms of responding, because we had good people and good systems in place that I was proud of. But it was a sad day in this community that you have something like that happen. We got national attention. And the CNN guys, I think they were there when I got there. I mean, they were, you know, the media moves so quickly now, so we had to be able to respond to that. But again, we just had a great team that everybody did their job and did it well, from the public safety folks to the public information people to our interaction with the family, with the Sikh community. So it was, but it was a very unusual time to be in city government, because we were all trying to figure out how to be prepared, and we all started to look at how do you protect water treatment plants and other facilities that are really hard to protect. But and again,
in this region, we all shared information. That was how we got through the planning and making sure we were protecting the citizens.
So your career, with most of the people that we've talked to for this oral history project, people are, they're moving around a lot.
Yeah.
They're gaining experience in one size city and applying it somewhere else, so I think it sort of begs the question here, what do you think it means for a city to have the kind of continuity that you, as an individual, provided?
I think it's really a good thing. And in Mesa and most of the cities in this region, the senior management stayed and today stays a long time. And I think it's helpful for, of course, a historical perspective of why you do certain things. But I think the advice that seasoned, experienced people can give elected officials is important. And I think most elected officials appreciate that. Because they may get tired of hearing about the past, but you do learn from the past, or you should. We were fortunate, again, because this was a growth region and we shared ideas, that there was never I mean, I think if you're in an organization, you can get stale, but because of the rapid growth and the environment we were in, you know, you had to keep abreast of changes. And our elected officials throughout this region encouraged us to do innovative things and go to conferences and learn and go visit other cities, find out what they're doing. So we were able to do that in our organization, much like the other metro area cities. So the notion of new ideas, there was always, you were trying to hear what was going on through your professional association and from travel, and you were able to find out new ideas. Mm-hmm. Now, reflecting after being retired 3.5 years, I do think that there is a need for new blood in organizations and new ideas. And I probably might not have articulated that before I retired, but thinking back, you know, there's a lot of folks out there that are smart and well-educated and obviously can bring new perspectives to the challenges you have today. So I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing for an organization to have transitions, because you know, you may lose a little bit from the lack of experience. You'll probably make some organizational mistakes, but getting new ideas into the organization is a positive thing. There's a lot of smart young people out there that are, you know, they're the leaders today, and they're going to be the leaders for the next 20 or 30 years. And if you look at the interns that we had, or the Marvin Andrews Fellows, I mean, the future to me is bright, because they got people that are anxious and to make a difference.
Mm-hmm. And how do you how does the program attract people? How do you actually recruit people? Because
Well,
you've got so much competition.
Yeah, we're trying to do a better job at that, and that's one of the. We obviously, all of us in the profession who are keeping abreast of the changes and the need to attract new people. I think a lot of people have taken on that challenge, be it to go to a high school civics class and talk to kids about your local government and careers. I would do that. My wife taught government and history in Mesa schools, and so I'd go talk to the kids, and I'd always pitch them about the career. I'd talk about my career and what it meant, and so that's, and we don't do a good a job in the United States and probably throughout the world of telling people how government works in their certainly in their elementary and high school classes. So many states have tried to develop programs to educate young people about local government and city management. And we've done some of that.
You need a television program.
They-
Why is it all hospital shows and police and crime scenes,
Well,
you know?
there's this new Parks and Rec program, that's city.
Okay, well,
that
that's a
was-
start.
And so I didn't watch
Yeah,
it,
I
but
heard about that.
some of my friends watched it and they said, you ought to watch that.
You need one
Uh,
based here in the valley, you know? City managers.
So, we're trying to educate, folks, the young people about the profession and government, and also, there's a pretty aggressive activity, I think, at ASU through the various counseling programs and the, career fairs, that if there's a student who's an undergrad, maybe a history major, political science major, we're not doing probably as well as we should be, but we're getting better about talking to those folks about public administration. And to recruit, for the Marvin Anders program, we send information throughout the country to all the public administration undergrad programs, and try to encourage people to apply for this program. And most students, when they see the opportunity, they're pretty interested, and that'll continue to grow over time.
Can you talk about how also, in the, however many years it is that you've been in this business, how it's opened up to women, to
Yeah.
minorities?
Yeah,
to
really
how-
a great thing
how's
for
that
the,
changed?
for the profession and for the governance and management of these cities, to get a multitude of perspectives. And it was a male-dominated field for years. But
Even beyond the engineering. You can
yeah,
understand how it
yeah,
grew
yeah.
out of-
But, in the late '70s, when I started to go to school, I mean, there was a lot of women in the MBA program when I started. There's more now, and there's more minority students. So, we continue to work in our profession to try to encourage women and minority applicants into the MBA programs, which that is you really, to be in the city government today, you've got to have a master's in public administration. I mean, it's the entry card. So I always tell young people that they need to seriously think about, if they're undergrads, that they've got to really take that next step. They could maybe work a little bit, but they ought to be in some public administration program. So the impact in our organization's been great, and we did a lot of things in our organization, MESA, to promote opportunities for women and minorities throughout the organization. And we did pretty good. And can we do better? Sure. But I always felt like the women and minorities in our organization felt like they were integral parts of the organization. Just
Must have been just a very emotional,
yeah.
once in a lifetime,
Yeah.
surreal kind of situation.
Yeah.
So the woman who was then chief of police.
Yeah, we
had
had,
this situation.
our chief of police was a woman named Jan Strauss. And Jan served as she was a longtime employee in the police department. Worked her way up through the ranks and was appointed chief in the 90s. Just a great individual and public servant and public safety official. And when we went on that scene in that very unusual week that we were all living through, and we went out and the individual had been slain, we went to the house of the family, and he lived 4 blocks. And the chief and I decided to go in and talk to the family about what we were going to do, and express our condolences, and then talk about the public safety activities as we tried to capture the guy who had shot this individual. And our Jan was just unbelievably professional in her approach and empathetic to the family. I was really proud of being associated with her. way she handled that traumatic situation. And as I said, our organization responded, with the trying to both help the family as they struggled with understanding why that would happen, and then try to make sure we did our public safety folks were out catching the bad guy. So it was just a very